What takes a man out of a successful career in biotech and leads him all the way to being not just a chiropractor, but president of a chiropractic college? Today, you're in for a treat. We have two stories, one about what got Dr. Jack Bourla into chiropractic, and the second story, what has kept him here. We're also going to dig into the layers underneath the stories of the chiropractic principle, why it matters, and the 33 principles of chiropractic, why this philosophy matters for a doctor's certainty, confidence, and competence. I'm Jenna Quinton, founder of Adjust Your Media and host of What Chiropractic Doesn't Cure, Stories of Innate podcast. There's lots of information in the show notes, including a link to the 33 principles, so don't miss that. There's also more help for you if you need help sharing your stories, and there's more information about Sherman Chiropractic College as well. So let's dig in. Today's guest on What Chiropractic Doesn't Cure, Stories of Innate, is the president of Sherman Chiropractic College, Dr. Jack Bourla. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So just a little bit more of your intro, that you have been there at Sherman since the end of 2022. Is that right?
Correct. December 1st, 2022.
Awesome.
First day here.
Wonderful. And then before that, you were in practice in California. You've been very involved in the chiropractic community. So I'm really excited to have you just share. You're a brilliant speaker. So I'm excited for today.
Thank you. You're very kind.
So you're a great storyteller as well. So tell us a story about somebody whose life just was improved with chiropractic.
Perfect. Can I give you two stories?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'll tell you the first story, which is actually what got me into chiropractic. I, unlike many people, never had any aspirations of becoming a chiropractor. My parents are immigrants from Algeria, and they came here in the early 50s, and they had my sister and me, and we were born and raised in San Francisco, California. And as a Jewish boy, I really only had two choices in life. One was attorney or medical doctor.
Okay.
And I knew I didn't want to argue with people all day long because that's what marriage is for. So I decided I was going to become a medical doctor, and specifically a medical doctor. I want to be a cosmetic surgeon for disfigured children. Back when I was younger, they had these things called magazines, and magazines oftentimes had pictures. And these pictures, particularly in Life magazine, would depict these children with horrific facial disfigurements. And I thought, if I don't do something about that, these kids will never have a normal life. And so my plan was to go to medical school and become a cosmetic surgeon. So I did, the whole undergraduate thing. I did a bachelor's in cell molecular biology. I did master's work in physiology and behavior biology. And I was on my way to medical school, and then I met a woman. And that totally derailed me. She was a bit older than me, and she had two kids. And so I had to make a choice, medical school or this new family. So I picked the new family. And because of the new family, I was not able to go to medical school as God and the universe would have it. So we got married. And one New Year's Day, she woke up after we had gone out the night before. One New Year's Day, she woke up unable to move her legs out of nowhere. Wow. Out of nowhere. So I did the typical thing. I put her in the car, took her to the emergency room where they admitted her, they imaged her, they medicated her, they injected her. And by about 3:30 in the afternoon, there was no change at all in her condition. And they said, that's all we could do. Let's see what time we'll do for you. Well, I loaded her back in the car, took her home. And on New Year's Day, I always call my friends to wish them a Happy New Year. And I happened to be talking to one of my buddies, and I told him what happened. He says, why don't you call my chiropractor? And I said, what is a chiropractor going to do that this modern medical facility couldn't do? He says, I don't know, but he's helped me. Why don't you call him? I said, it's New Year's Day. He said, call anyway. So I called this guy on New Year's Day, picks up the phone. I can hear children in the background. I explained to him who I am and what my predicament is. And he said, it would be impossible for me to help her unless I actually examined her. And I said, well, I understand. He says, I'll see you at 5:30 in my office. I said, oh, that's terrific. I said, well, where's your office? He told me, I'll see you tomorrow at 5:30. He says, no. I'll see you today at 5:30.
Today, yeah.
New Year's Day. And I said, doctor, it's New Year's Day. He goes, oh, I know what day it is, but I took an oath. And those words, I took an oath, have never left the back of my mind. So at 5:30, I loaded her back in the car. We went to his office. He was very kind. I'd never been to a chiropractic office before. I had no idea what to expect. He took us in. He had a great consultation. He did a phenomenal full spinal examination, including her nerve system. And then he says, I think she has what I can help her with. And at the time, he said vertebral subluxation, but I had no idea what he was talking about. He put her on this table that went up and down. I thought, this is like a circus act. Went down, then he gets on top of her. And I said, dude, what are you doing? He said, trust me. So he got on top of her. He did this thing, which we now know is the adjustment. And I heard this sound.
Yeah.
And I thought, what in the world was that? And she got up off the table and walked out.
Yeah.
And I thought, holy smokes. I said, because of that, She and I became patients of his. We went every Friday at 4 o'clock, never missed an appointment unless we're out of town or his office was closed. And it wasn't because we had neck pain, back pain, headache, sciatica, amenorrhea, dysmenorrhea, diarrhea, none of those rheas. We just went because we knew we functioned better.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did a number of things before I became a chiropractor. And I taught for 2 years at Stanford State University. I was a family planning counselor. I worked in administration at the Stanford University Blood Center. I worked in BioTech for 10 years, and I was done with BioTech, and I made a ton of money. This back in the 80s when they paid us way too much money. And I thought, what am I going to do next? And so I said, I'm going to buy some restaurants. So I bought 3 restaurants, did that for 5 years. It was the worst thing in the world for me to ever do. Don't ever think about buying a restaurant. I'll talk you out of it. I'll talk you out of it. And so I thought, what am I going to do? I knew I was put on earth to help people. I knew that was my role. I just didn't know what it was. Initially, I thought it was going to be a cosmetic surgeon for disfigured kids. But I thought, well, with the results I've had from chiropractic, I'll look into chiropractic college. And so I did. And in the San Francisco Bay Area, there were 2 colleges. I picked one. I went to Palmer West. And from the very first day, Jenna, that I sat in those classrooms, I knew it was the right place for me at the right time. So that's what got me into chiropractic. And for 25 years, I practiced in my office. I had a great practice that many people would love to have had. But I had another story, and this is probably the best story of all. And so I got remarried. I've had 17 wives, just so you know. No, I've not. I haven't. I've had 2. My first wife was phenomenal. She passed away, but she was phenomenal. But we had a child with my second wife. And during the time that she was pregnant, she was at the International Space University in Strasbourg, France. So she's actually an honest to God rocket scientist.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah, she's a real one. And while she was there, we would talk every night on Skype. And she said one night, I would really like to have a home birth. And I said, it's your body. Whatever you want to do is going to be fine. So she said, that's what I'd like to do. So I said, why don't we independently research midwives in our area? And when you come back, we can start independent. So we did. And we actually agreed on one thing. It's not very often that we agree on anything, but we agreed that on the same midwife. So when she came back, we went to the midwife classes on Wednesday nights and Saturdays. And we learned all about what it was going to be like to have a home birth. And our son was due on August 11th. And on July 30th, we were at the veterinarian's with our dog and her water broke.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. And so what do men typically do when their partner's water break? We freak out.
Yeah.
So I freaked out. So she calls me down as if I was having the baby. I called our midwife, Rosanna, told her what was happening. She said, go home. You know what to do. We'll be there as soon as we can. We're in the process of another delivery. So it's about 5:30 in the afternoon. And so we're doing all the things. We're doing the breathing exercises, the stretching, the legs, all the things that we're supposed to do. And as time passed, the moans were getting louder and louder, and the intervals were getting shorter and shorter. And again, because I'm a Jewish man, we tend to freak out about most things. I'm really freaking out about this whole delivery thing. Finally, 9:30 at night, there was a knock on our door. I opened the door, and there's 5 women on my porch. And it was the midwife team. I was never so happy to see that many women that late at night.
Yeah.
Porch. So they come in. Rosanna was great. Her team, they take over. They do all the things. And she examines my wife, Erin, and she says, she's fully dilated. This baby should come out. So she did all the different things that she was supposed to do. She examined her again, and she said, we need to call an ambulance. We have to transport to the hospital. Our son, Evan, had passed his first bowel movement, the meconium, which if it gets aspirated into your lungs can cause irreparable damage. So we call an ambulance, we transport to the hospital. Fortunately for us in the ER, there was a midwife who exchanged information with our midwife. And she said to me, I need to examine your wife. And I said, you do whatever you have to do to make sure that this woman and this child get out safely. Yep. So she did her examination. She says, I need to monitor the baby. So they put a clamp, an electrode on his scalp, which I guess monitors his blood oxygen levels and blood pressure and all the things that the vital signs that they can. And she says to me, this child is in grave danger. We need to call the emergency pediatrician. I said, you call whomever you need to. Let's get this done. So she was doing her work and doing all kinds of stuff. And all of a sudden, in comes the pediatrician, a 12-year-old with a white lab coat on. And I said, hey, where's your dad? He says, yeah, I'm the guy. So I'm thinking, oh my God. And just as he comes in, out came Evan, my son. And I had been present for my daughter's birth, so I know what a live birth looked like. He came out, Jenna, motionless, colorless, no breathing, no response to anything. He was just a blob of matter.
That's terrifying.
It was terrifying. And so they're thinking, he's got this meconium in his lungs and we need to do something. So they cut the umbilical cord and they hand the baby off to this young doctor. And my wife has no idea what's going on. And I said, I'm going to go check on the baby. I'll be right back. So I went to go check on the baby. And I said, Doc, give it to me straight. What's going on? He says, we don't know. I said, well, what are the choices? He says, well, he could die. I said, okay, what else you got? He says, well, it depends on how much of the meconium he's aspirated, but he could be here for several weeks until his body normalizes. I said, what's your plan? He says, we're going to go up into the NICU. We'll work on him. We'll work on him for a few hours. We'll call you when we have some information. Meanwhile, you get your wife settled in. And I said, before you do that, I'd like her to hold him.
Yes.
Just a second.
Yes.
Not knowing if she would ever hold him again or have an opportunity to hold him. So he says, do it quickly. So I grabbed my son, Evan, and as I walk into my wife, chiropractic brain kicks in. What happened was that for about 10 hours, the reason he wasn't coming out is because part of her cervix had got caught on his forehead. So every time she pushed out, he was doing this for 10 hours. And I'm going, what must his upper cervical spine look like? So I held him. I brought him to my wife, Erin. I said, hold him for a second. She did. I palpated him. Now, I didn't have cone beam CT scan. I didn't have thermography. I had nothing but two hands and a will to do something. I palpated his atlas, and Jenna, it felt to me like his atlas was in another state.
Wow.
So as we were trained to do, gentle sustained pressure. I checked him, gentle sustained pressure, and I determined, I think it feels better. I gave him back to the doctor, and up they went into the NICU. And so I got my wife settled. And about 45 minutes later, I said, I got to go check on the baby.
Yeah.
I left her. I went to the NICU. The NICU set up where there's a window that you look inside. There's an anteroom, room, like an airlock. And then there's the room, and I could see the doctor and the nurse at the very far end of the NICU, standing at the foot of the bassinet and not doing anything. And my first thought was, he died. So I busted in. I'm not wearing a mask or a gown or no. I bust in. And as I'm walking towards the bassinet, I hear crying getting louder and louder and louder. And I got to the doctor. I said, doctor, what's going on? He says, we don't know, but your son's APGAR score is 9+, which is really high. He's 9+. You can hear him breathing. He's crying. He's got full perfusion of blood throughout his body. You can take him. And I took that guy. As I was leaving the NICU, I thought to myself, what if the only reason I went to chiropractic college was to deliver that one adjustment? And because of the effects that I saw of the adjustment, because nothing else was done to him, I became convicted at that point, Jenna, that chiropractic has an ability to change lives.
Yes.
And that's what changed me from, I thought I was a good chiropractor to a very good to perhaps even a great chiropractor. Because I had instilled in me this knowledge and this experience that what chiropractic can do to anybody. Now, he was in distress. I used to go, my first wife used to go, not because we were in distress, but because we knew that our body functioned better, because we knew that inside of us is this incredible intelligence that when allowed to flow from the brain to the body and back, we can survive, thrive, and do almost anything we want in life. So my first experience with chiropractic is what got me into chiropractic. My second experience is what kept me in chiropractic.
Awesome. Yeah. That is so deep on so many levels. Like you say, that one moment of clarity where that innate nudge of saying, you know what to do. You know what to do right now.
Absolutely. And the best thing that chiropractor can learn from that experience is that we chiropractors don't make the adjustment. We entice Innate to make the adjustment. Innate knows what to do when it's free of interference. And when a body's free of interference, there's really nothing you can't do. I mean, I understand there's physical limitations. We all have limitations of our matter. But the truth is, if the matter is sound and you have proper communication between the brain and the body and back, there's really nothing you can't do.
Yeah. Yeah. All of it comes back to this principle, though, like you said, of what we know and what we think we know. We're always looking through the world at our own philosophical lens, which is fascinating to me. You said, your parents coming from Algeria, they have a different view of the world than my parents who, came from Kansas. My husband, being French, grew up not just in a different culture, but even on a DNA genetic makeup, genetic history differently than mine. So we talk about 33 principles in chiropractic. And this kind of comes back to the first one, which is that there's universal intelligence, no matter who your parents were, no matter where you were born, no matter where you came from. How important are these 33 principles? Why do they matter?
Well, that's the premise upon which this profession has been built. So D.D. Palmer and B.J. Palmer through Ralph W. Stevenson developed the chiropractic textbook in which the 33 principles are discussed. It's interesting because we human beings tend to complicate things so much, right? Instead of simplifying the complicated, we complicate the complicated. And we also tend to believe everything we hear and see. And so One of the ways I look at life is that I'm going to read, but I'm going to have discernment. And I'm
Mm,
going to make sure that what I'm reading is true and or accurate, no matter what my lens is, because there's only one truth. People say, well, my truth or your, no, there's no my truth. There is the truth.
yes.
And either we buy into the truth or we don't. And that's our choice. And we'll see that through our lens, as you've already said. But the lens in chiropractic is such that we have these 33 principles, which is a deductive science. We start with a major premise and we work our way down. And it tells the chiropractor the chiropractic story. And the
Mhm.
story is that we have within us this a portion of universal intelligence, which we call innate intelligence. It animates our living being. And this intelligence, when it is operating properly, it's always normal. The question is it being interfered with? And the interference that we look at through the chiropractic lens is the vertebral subluxation. And that's what chiropractors are highly trained in doing, to locate, to analyze, and then to assist the body to correct vertebral subluxation, not necessarily because you have neck pain or back pain or sciatica. It's because your body has this potential to function optimally.
Mhm.
And vertebral subluxation is an entity which can interfere with your body's ability, just like a tumor or a serious injury can. But from a chiropractic point of view, is we are highly trained to look for this entity, the vertebral subluxation, and then know appropriately how to handle it. And so when you're certain about your understanding of the 33 principles, it gives you this confidence and this competence with which to take care of the people who present themselves before you, which, by the way, is a blessing.
Mhm.
None of us should ever think that we're owed patients or practice members or clients. No, when they come to us, it's a blessing and you should treat it as such. It's an honor for someone to say, please take care of me.
Yes,
It's even a greater honor when someone says, please take care of my baby.
absolutely.
And so there's certain things that we have to, as chiropractors, recognize. And that is, number one, we're not God. So
Mhm.
don't pretend you are, but have an adherence to these 33 principles, which will help you to behave in such a manner that all the educated things that you learned, which are super important in colleges, you have to know how to translate those into a practice.
Yeah.
And have this understanding of the 33 principles allows us to do that with certainty, confidence, and competence. And so I don't think that we should be beating up our patients, hitting them over the head with our green books. The green books are for us, the chiropractic
Mhm.
profession. How we communicate that is the art of being a doctor, the art of being a
Absolutely.
chiropractor. And so once you become confident in these principles and you're able to understand them, they're very complex. Once you can do that, and then you can put those into English or Spanish or Chinese, whatever language you happen to speak, for the people that you're serving, they will understand that you have within you something different than other healthcare providers.
Yes, I
And
love that.
And I actually don't even like to use healthcare providers because I don't think that we're in the health business. I think we're in the human potential business. And when we're expressing our optimum human potential, health is a byproduct of that.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Good.
This kind of leads me into, I think that people have gotten a good taste of what it's like to learn from you and to hear you on stage because you're doing exactly what you just said, where you're taking more complex ideas and turning it back into English for us. I love how you blend humor in. This is something I was thinking about this morning, is that you share personal stories without making it about you,
Yeah.
which is not easy to do. And we get stuck into this even when people say, oh, tell your story, or they say, write what you know, or, teach from your own experience and things. But too often we make it then about ourselves. So, how do you encourage doctors to share chiropractic both with personality but also with purpose?
Yeah. The truth is this, Jenna, if it was about me, people would be bored to death. And that's not what I'm here for. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't do that. I think when you have a certain reverence for the work that you do and you understand how important it is, it no
Mm-hmm.
longer becomes about you, it becomes about other people. And that's what's important. I oftentimes hear people say, that's such a great story about your son. I wish I had a story like that. To
Mm-hmm.
which I say, take mine, take my story, make it your own. You can say, I know this guy who, you don't have to experience everything in life to enjoy life. And so you don't
Yes.
have to experience everything in chiropractic to enjoy chiropractic. Sometimes it's a story that you hear. I hear stories like, for example, I was a DE so were you. We were a DE a couple of weeks ago, and we heard great stories. And so I like to incorporate those stories into a much larger story. And the story is about chiropractic and what chiropractic can do, not for the individual necessarily, but for humanity in general.
Absolutely. Christ spoke in parables. All of the leaders of the world, something that we see in common is this thread of storytelling. I think about how many times I go back to a simple Chinese parable that recenters me really quickly. This thought of we can use these stories, like you said, whether we've experienced or whether we've heard them,
Mhm.
to explain complicated things. And I'm going to put the 33 principles in the show notes in case anybody doesn't know them, because it's something that I still look back up. But, you mentioned the major premise, and the major premise is a universal intelligence is in all matter and continually
Continually
gives to
gives
it
to
all
it
its properties and actions, thus
thus
maintaining it
maintaining in
in
existence.
existence. And, you take that and you put it into a story of a newborn.
Yeah.
And like when you're on stage, you show his beautiful picture and it makes sense. Or we take, the number 6, when my 6-year-old is whining about something and why does it take so long? And you take, principle number 6, there is no process that does not require time.
Time.
And it comes back to whether we're talking about pregnancy. This baby needs this amount of time to develop well, whether it is, these migraines, this other dysfunction, this gut health, it all takes time. It comes back to where we have these big principles and we can translate them into life with stories.
Yeah. And actually, if you don't, then what use are the principles?
Right.
Here's the interesting thing. And this is something that I hope chiropractors and even lay people will understand. If you look at the 33 principles, the word health never appears.
Mm.
The word life and living appear 4 times and 11 times respectively. So if you look at the 33 principles, it's not about health, it's about life.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I would encourage someone who's interested in learning the philosophy and the principle of chiropractic is don't do it alone.
Mm.
Find someone who knows more about the subject than you. And there's a number of people, there's a number of resources. Dr. Claude Lessard is rewriting the textbook, actually called the textbook 2027. 1927 was when the original chiropractic textbook was published. He's going through in 4 volumes. 2 of them are published. I'm actually editing the 3rd volume, and the 4th volume will come out sometime later. But he's taken all the concepts within the chiropractic textbook and he's modernizing them. He's not
Mm-hmm.
changing them. He is enhancing our understanding of them. And it's something that if you were to pick up that book by yourself, you probably would be a little bit discouraged and you'd be overwhelmed by it because it's very complicated. So find groups that talk about chiropractic. Find other chiropractors who have more knowledge about it than you and become their student. Come to Sherman. We do, here's a selfish plug, but we do the
Absolutely.
Academy of Chiropractic Philosophers, which is a deep dive into the philosophy. And you can sign up for that. And then once you do that, you can get into the diplomate program. There's other programs you can do. Of course, I would encourage you to look at the Sherman one, but find people. And that's what I did. That's what I did. I went to Palmer. Palmer is named after the founder and the developer of chiropractic. And although I had some philosophy, I did not have enough to really get me convicted into what truly is chiropractic. And so I was fortunate enough that God put in my path people from whom I learned. And because of them, now I'm able to teach a little bit. And I'm not an expert because if you looked at my volume 14, Stevenson's Chiropractic, if you looked at it's a mess. It's actually held together by a Gorilla Tape. I've
Yeah.
got pages, I've got highlights, I've got references because I chose to take this seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And the seriousness of this is that it requires you to dedicate yourself to learning. And as soon as you stop learning, I think that's the beginning of the end. BJ Palmer said, as soon as you think you're ripe, you begin to rot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we need to be reminded of that. So as long as you're breathing, you should continue to learn. You can
Mm-hmm.
always be a better version of yourself. And so find those areas, find those people, find those places, find those programs can allow you to grow deeper and deeper and deeper into the chiropractic philosophy and principles.
Well, I love this whole conversation because it's something that sets Sherman apart is this deep of a love for the principle. And I know that there are times when people would, like if we looked at a school of journalism, for example, and you said, okay, why would this school of journalism be so dedicated to this philosophy of storytelling and truth telling? And it's like, okay, well, if it comes down to it, which journalist do you want? Do you want the one that knows their grammar, right? Knows their punctuation, sure, is competent. But like you said, the certainty and confidence, that to me, I would say, comes from a philosophical foundation.
100%. If you don't know who you are, how are you able to then tell other people who you are? They're not going to
Mm,
be able to look into a crystal ball and say, oh, you must. People know who you are because, yes, there's the conversations that take place, there's the communication. There's also this innate conversation that takes place where, women call it women's intuition, men call it a gut reaction, whatever it is. We connect with people, and oftentimes we do without verbal, without the spoken word. So if you don't know who you are, then you don't know where you're going. If you don't know where you're going, how are you supposed to help people?
yeah.
And I tell people, you could be the most philosophically sound chiropractor. You could have the best techniques in the world. You could do the best analysis ever done. But if you don't have a heart to serve people, you're probably in the wrong business. Go do
Hmm.
something different, because it's all about the heart. And one of the things that we really believe here at Sherman is that it started with the Gilardi's, Tom and Betty Gilardi, whose hearts are enormous. And it's going to continue as long as I have anything to say about it, because it's about a heart thing. It's about,
Yeah.
do you really love people?
Hmm.
Right? You may not like them, but do you really love them?
Yes.
And if you do, then you have the heart to serve. Get out there and serve.
Well, and I think it comes back to, as a mother, comes back to your story of a newborn and even your wife in trouble, where I'm not a chiropractor. So when I place my child under someone's hands
Mhm.
and say, help them, I want that chiropractor to be leading from their heart where they have that certainty and confidence and competence. And I can't even find the exact word that I want because I don't want them to be adjusted while their chiropractor is thinking about football.
You're right.
I don't want it to be just a automatic, like, okay, well, pippity pop and off we go. When I think about like that precious newborn, I've been thinking about my newborns lately and now they're all bigger. But like that moment where you see them and they're all pink and fuzzy and
Yes.
and fresh.
Yeah. I'll tell you something else, Jenna, which is so important, that when a chiropractor knows who they are, they understand the principles and the philosophy. From that comes two qualities that patients are looking to us for. One is, do they trust us? And do they believe that we're competent?
Hmm.
I would not hand over my child or my wife or my sibling to somebody who I didn't trust and who I felt was not competent. And the way you develop competence is by studying.
Hmm.
You've got to study. You got to study your anatomy, your physiology, and your biochemistry. You got to study all the things that will allow you, the doctor, the chiropractor, to show these people, yes, you can trust me because I'm competent and I will do the best I can for you. And by the way, I care about you. In my practice, after 25 years, I sold my practice. On the last day of my practice was a really, really sad day for me because I was saying goodbye to people whom I knew in utero,
Hmm.
right? They weren't even born yet when I knew of them. And then they grew up and they started coming to me. And now some of them were having kids. So I was seeing 3 and 4 generations at a time because they trusted me. They felt that I was competent. And I think more important, they knew that I really cared about them. They say, don't be friends with your patients. I think that's a bunch of hogwash. I was asked on a few occasions to officiate weddings, which I did. I was invited to bar mitzvahs, to christenings, to plays, to dance recitals, to all the soccer games, to birthday parties, because I became part of their family.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking for more family. I got plenty of my own, but I became part of theirs. And what a great compliment that is. And not because of me. It's not
Hmm.
me. It's anybody who actually says, I care about you. And if you do, you will have a practice for many years to come where there'll be nothing but pure joy. In 25 years, I honestly, and this, I know it's kind of cliche, I never once woke up in the morning and said, I got to go to work today. I woke up every morning, thank God for my ability, I'm awake, and I got to go to work every day. And there were some days on the weekends where I didn't have to go, but I just drove in to sit in my office because that was my place. That was the
Yeah.
place for grounding. And I hope that all chiropractors, I feel blessed that I was afforded the opportunities and took them to create that type of environment. I hope that others have the same opportunity.
I love that. That's beautiful. Well, I know that we could keep talking for a long, long
Let's.
time. So I'm going to put links to Sherman College, links to where people can find out about, like you said, all of the amazing events and opportunities that there are
Awesome.
there in the show notes because That is just such a wonderful place to know that you're creating the next generation of chiropractors. Like I said, my 8-year-old, he'll be ready. And I think I added it up and it was like, okay, in like 22 years or something, it would be amazing to send one of my kids out there to you as well. But I'm going to put all of those in the show notes. And also, I'm going to encourage people that if they would like to hear you speak in person, meet with you in person, you're in a lot of places.
I'm in a lot of places. And please feel free to put my cell number in that information. My job is to serve others, and I can't serve them if they can't get a hold of me. Now, don't call me at 2 a.m. in the morning and breathe heavy in the phone. Don't do that. In fact, don't even call me. You can text me.
There you
If you
go.
text me, tell me who you are. I promise I'll get back to you within the hour generally. But my job and my desire is to serve others. And so if that would help, feel free to text me and I'll do the best I can to help you or answer any questions you have.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.